When an economic shock hits, say a job loss or a health crisis, many of us might rely on a government safety net. But what happens when that net is weak or maybe doesn't even exist? Well, today we're going to explore the really ingenious ways vulnerable households manage risk and build their own lines of defense, both privately and within their communities. Okay, let's dive in.
This quote from a mother during the COVID-19 pandemic, it just cuts right to the heart of what we're talking about. For millions of people around the world, the most immediate threat isn't the shock itself, but the economic fallout that comes after. It's a daily reality that sets the stakes incredibly high.
So, to understand how people cope, we first need to get a handle on this concept of vulnerability. See, it's not just about being poor in this exact moment. It's about living on the edge, where any kind of unexpected event could push you over.
So here's the crucial point. Vulnerability is really a measure of risk. It's the probability of falling into poverty. A household might be getting by today, but a single negative shock, like a big medical bill or a bad harvest, could change absolutely everything tomorrow.
And this visual does a brilliant job of illustrating that risk. Think of that vulnerability zone as a sloped plateau. You can see how just a small nudge could easily send that ball rolling down into what we call a poverty trap. But climbing up towards the stability of the middle class, well, that requires a huge, sustained uphill effort, fighting against that slope the whole way.
So, when you're faced with that kind of precarious reality, what can a single household actually do? Let's take a look at the first lines of defense. These are the private solutions that rely on a family's own resources and decisions.
This chart kind of lays out the whole toolkit. We're going to start at the top here with those private mechanisms. A household's human capital, its physical assets, and its access to financial resources. And one of the most difficult choices involves what's called human capital. Do you keep your children in school, investing in their long-term potential, or do you pull them out to work, bringing in that desperately needed income right now? It's a really painful trade-off between the future and just immediate survival. Households also turn to the things they physically own. This could mean selling off land or livestock. For a lot of people, it means heading to a pawn shop, where everyday items like appliances or jewelry can be used as collateral for a small loan. And of course, if there are any savings, they're used up and credit is sought from pretty much anywhere it can be found.
But here's where we see a huge divide: access to credit. A family with formal guarantees might be able to get a bank loan with a fair interest rate, but a family without those guarantees, well, they're often forced into the informal market. That means borrowing from family, or worse, from high-interest loan sharks who might even use intimidation and violence to collect. The risk there is just enormous.
Now, when these private solutions aren't enough or they're just too risky, households don't just give up. They turn to what might be their greatest asset, each other. This is where we see the incredible power of community-based safety nets.
And it's really important to remember, these networks are not some modern invention. They've existed for thousands of years, popping up as a form of social protection long before the modern state. The fact that they've persisted for so long shows just how effective they can be.
So what makes these networks actually tick? Well, what's so interesting is that it's not just about pure self-interest. It's a really powerful mix of what we call social preferences, genuine care for others, altruism, the expectation that help you give will one day be returned, reciprocity, and a fundamental desire to just reduce unfairness within the group.
So, what do these networks actually look like on the ground? Let's explore some specific and pretty ingenious examples from different parts of the world.
Here are three really distinct examples. You have the IDER in Ethiopia, which is a community fund to make sure everyone can afford dignified funeral costs. Then you have Roskas, which are found globally for saving and credit. And even in a developed country like the Netherlands, you have a Brood Funds, which provides sickness benefits for entrepreneurs. Each one is tailored to a specific community need.
Let's focus on the ROSCA for a moment, because it's one of the most common forms of these community institutions. The concept is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. A group of people pools their savings together, and then they take turns receiving the entire pot.
So here's a simple example of how it works. Imagine 20 households agree to each contribute $50 a week. That creates a pool of $1,000. Every single week, one member of the group receives that full $1,000. The cycle just repeats for 20 weeks, and by the end, every single member has received a large lump sum payment.
The advantages here are pretty clear. First, there's no need for formal collateral like a bank would require. The whole system runs on trust and a bit of social pressure. Second, on average, members get the lump sum they need much faster than if they were trying to save up that amount all by themselves. And finally, it forces a discipline of saving. It acts as a really powerful commitment device. And, this model is incredibly adaptable. Just look at the brood funds in the Netherlands. You have self-employed workers who often lack state unemployment benefits, forming these small, trusted groups. They contribute monthly, and if one of them gets sick and can't work, the fund provides them with an income. It's a modern solution to a very modern problem, but it's built on that ancient principle of mutual support.
All of these private and community solutions show an incredible amount of resilience and ingenuity in the face of risk. But it does leave us with a really critical question about their role in the bigger picture.
So, should we see these systems as a replacement for government safety nets, maybe as proof that the state isn't needed? Or are they a vital complement, something that fills the gaps that formal systems almost inevitably leave behind? The answer to that question probably shapes how we should design policies to help the world's most vulnerable people build more resilient lives.
And all the research for this explainer comes from the team over at Core Econ.